So Helene Warrench, our past president, will now introduce our speaker for today, Karen Sim, and thank you, Helene.
Good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to have the honor of introducing today's presenter, my friend Karen Sim of Cincinnati, Ohio, who serves as the first vice president of Women of Reform Judaism. Since she joined WRJ board over 20 years, Sharon has held such leadership positions as vice president of membership services and vice president of philanthropy, and chaired several important WRJ committees and initiatives: diversity, equity, and inclusion, speaker training, and the nominating committee for the WRJ board, just to name a few. Karen also serves on the board of the Union of Reform Judaism, and in her home congregation of Isaac M. Wise Temple, she's a member of its board and a past sisterhood president. Karen is the mother of 2 adult children, one who is just ordained as a reform rabbi, and her husband, who we can't do this without supportive husbands, and he's been terrific. Karen believes in the power of women informed by our Jewish values to speak out, to repair the world, and to sustain Judaism as a meaningful force for future generations. Karen and I have shared our passions, our families, and our friendship, and it's very special, and I am thrilled. I wish we were in person because I'd give Karen a big hug since she's sitting in her house in Cincinnati, but instead we'll just say hello. Karen has a great bit of knowledge to impart, and I think it will be important to you and your organization. And I'm thrilled to introduce Karen Sim to talk about Are You Listening? Can You Hear Me? Karen, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Helene, and thank you so much. And here's a big hug back at you. So let me see. Okay, good. Thank you very much. So good morning, everyone. I would like to thank C.C. Rund and the executive team of the Federation of Jewish Women's Organizations of Maryland for asking me to be with you here today. Thanks also go to Marcia Bornfriend for being the tech guru for today's program. I am looking forward to our time together. Please keep your screens on mute, and we'll take questions at the end of the program. So let's get started. Next slide, please. What is a listening campaign? Why would we want to conduct a listening campaign? Sharing techniques and things to remember when considering a listening campaign will be discussed in this workshop. And finally, then what? What should we do with what we learned from our listening campaigns? Next slide, please. A listening campaign is a directed effort to identify common concerns and priorities among members or prospective constituents. Through intentional one-to-one meetings and/or small groups, women are encouraged to share their stories. Through these opportunities of getting to know women more deeply, we can identify common ideas that can help us serve members, strengthen communities, shape visions, and identify prospective leaders. The results of a listening campaign can lead to new initiatives or programs, as well as deeper connections among members and between members and the organization. Next slide. Why do a listening campaign? As we have read recently in many reports from various Jewish organizations, it's no longer business as usual in terms of the traditional organizational model of Jewish communal life. If you build it, the Jews will come is no longer our watchword. We see a trend of diminishing membership of our temples and synagogues, as well as diminished membership in member-based nonprofits and philanthropic groups. Traditional models can no longer be our sole modus operandi going forward. Past assumptions about joining and immediately connecting must be reevaluated, and we should experiment with new ways of engaging. Next slide, please. So, why do a listening campaign? As modern Jewish life is changing, our women's groups need to adopt new approaches and adapt to new trends and cultural dynamics that impact our communities and all aspects of our lives. Bottom line, conducting a listening campaign can be an effective way to learn more about the women in our communities, engage new women, and help us remain receptive and responsive to their needs. Addressing the needs and interests of today's women requires paying attention and active listening. Next slide. So, what should we do? Our work includes listening carefully to people on the ground, what they care about and want to do collectively, removing and reducing real and perceived barriers to participation, and creating a culture of feel-good invitations for new people to get involved and matter to the collective. Do younger women see our groups as meaningful only for older women? If so, how can we break down that perceived barrier during a conversation? Do working women see our group as a group for stay-at-home moms or retired women and not for them? These may or may not seem to be real barriers to you, but these may be some members' perceptions. For these women, it is real. We say perception is reality, and our groups need to make sure these women are heard and changes are made to break down these barriers and welcome them into the group. I hear these specific barriers quite a lot. What barriers do you hear? If we do not really listen and we do not create change, then the listening group is a nice exercise with little long-term value. Next slide, please. Listening campaigns strengthen core principles of community building and community organizing in order to attract, engage, and empower the current generation and a new generation of women who will buy into and or rework our missions. We hold listening campaigns to make our members be our focus and create a sense of belonging and community. Next slide. How do we organize a listening campaign? This is the tachlis, the meat of preparing for a listening campaign. First, we identify our why. What is our reason for the listening campaign? What do we wish to learn? That's the first thing we need to do. We start by identifying leaders and creating task forces for our listening campaign. Leaders and task forces will end up organizing the listening groups, set up timelines and action plans, determine the questions that will be asked, seek out and get training for facilitators, set up the groups, invite people to attend, schedule the listening campaigns, collect responses, and then bring all of this back to the leadership of our organizations to decide on next steps. This is a big job. I'm kind of tired just listening to myself say all that stuff. Leaders and task forces will need to determine the number of one-to-one small group meetings we think we should hold, establish the specific cohorts we want to reach, members, non-members, different demographics, specific age groups. What do we look for in a facilitator? Someone who can really, really listen. Someone who does not need to be the center of attention. Someone who can think on their feet and can ask follow-up questions. Someone who makes others feel comfortable and valued. Why do we need a scribe? The facilitator should focus directly on listening and not on taking notes. A scribe serves as a backup timekeeper, keeps the facilitator on track, jots down keywords and thoughts, and keeps track of the names of the speakers to go back for clarification if needed. The scribe is really not a participant. They will take part in introductions and only speak up to ask clarifying questions if needed. Scribes need to make sure that they understand the message of the speaker rather than writing their own interpretation of what is said. Develop a plan for identifying the women you wish to reach. For example, if we are in a congregational setting, we can reach out to congregational leaders, staff, or clergy to help identify women who may be willing to participate in our listening campaigns. Most likely, we can get spreadsheets of certain demographic groups. If not congregationally based, how do we identify potential participants? What exists in our community that we can tap into? Training the leaders and facilitators in active listening is very important. Identifying questions we wish information about is critical. We only learn about what we ask about. And finally, what will we do with what we've learned? All of this needs to be addressed before we conduct a listening campaign. After the listening campaigns, our leadership teams need to be committed to review results and force rank what should be acted upon. We must create a list of priorities and work on action plans to investigate and effect change. We need to be committed to sharing the findings of our listening groups with the participants and with our entire organization. We need to let our organizations and the participants know what we are working on going forward. Next slide, please. So here are some examples of questions we can ask in our one-on-one meetings or in small groups. Have you been part of a women's group before? What are you looking for in a spiritual philanthropic service community? What do you feel passionate about? Notice that these questions are open-ended and non-judgmental. Notice that they are meant to elicit opinions and feelings. Next slide, please. So, what is active listening? How do we train our women to be active and engaged listeners? What is active listening? Listen to learn, not just to be polite, but genuinely curious about what you are hearing someone say. Quiet your agenda. Don't respond back with your own story, but instead, open your mind to ask more questions. Quiet your agenda and listen to what your members have on their minds. Next slide. Pay attention. Listen twice as much as you talk. That's the listen to talk ratio. Listen twice as much as you talk. As a facilitator, repeat back to the speaker what you've just heard. If the speaker agrees that you've heard what she intended to say, you can move on. If not, ask more questions to make sure, as the listener, you understand what she, as the speaker, is saying. This ensures that you've heard correctly and it validates the importance of the speaker. As part of facilitators training, we make sure that we give the facilitators time to practice these active listening skills. Ask facilitators to come to a practice session prepared with their story to share and pair people up to practice on each other and learn each other's stories. Next slide. How do we ask questions that encourage participation? Questioning is a uniquely powerful tool. It spurs learning and encourages the exchange of ideas, and it builds engagement. Start with questions everyone can agree upon and feel comfortable with. For example, do you wish to have a relationship with a community of like-minded Jewish women? Why do you want that? Another question, if you had a perfect Shabbat, what would that look like? As people share, ask them to expand their thoughts or provide examples of what they are talking about. Support women in what they are saying. Give positive feedback. What a great example. Or how did it feel when? Use the polling technique. How many of you have had similar experiences? Create camaraderie in your listening group. Ask clarifying questions. This ensures that you and members of the group understand what the speaker means. Paraphrase and ask for acknowledgement that we are all on the same page and understood. Next slide. Ask questions the person will enjoy answering. People usually love to talk about themselves. By asking a few probing questions, you will learn a lot about someone, and they will leave the conversation feeling good about participating. Defer to the group when asked a question. The facilitator is not the lead thought maker in a listening group. She is the lead listener. All of these techniques ensure that we are listening, and these techniques validate the feelings, observations, and opinions of the women participating in our listening group. Next slide, please. This slide shows an example of what an agenda should include. Key parts for a good listening campaign are a small group. I'll go into more detail in the next slide, but every listening group, even if it's a one-on-one conversation, should include a welcome and an introduction into why we are holding this session and what the goals of the organization are, which are to hear from you, an opening prayer, maybe a short devar, some kind of opening something or other, not in a one-to-one conversation, but in a small group setting, and introductions or an icebreaker, listening questions, a debrief and next steps, very important, and a closing prayer or spiritual moment. I saw that from your agenda, so I will use that term. Next slide, please. Here are some details of an example for an agenda. A good meeting, if you want the specifics of timing, this kind of lets you know that the biggest part of your listening campaign is actually the question and getting the answers. A good meeting will involve a sharing of stories and experiences through which people will connect their interests. The point of the meeting is to create enthusiasm and for ideas to emerge. This meeting is not intended to solve problems. The leaders will let the group know that there will be follow-up and that there will be pragmatic outcomes based on these conversations. What are we going to do with the information after we have done the listening campaign? Are we prepared as women's organizations to make some changes, to revise some things, to replan, to restructure? We cannot just say, quote, the executive committee will have meetings about this and then let things drop. Next slide, please. Conducting a listening campaign should be a way to learn more about the women in our communities, learn more about the women we wish to engage, and to ensure that we are responsive to the needs of our current and prospective constituents. Next slide, please. To recap, what do we need to consider before starting a listening campaign? Why do we want to hold a listening campaign? Who will organize this activity, create plans, keep everything moving forward? Who will develop the task forces, ask people to be facilitators and scribes? Who will guide the process? Who will we ask to participate? And how do we find them? What questions will we ask? How do we train facilitators? How do we share what is learned? And what are we prepared to do with what we've learned? Next slide. Why do we do listening campaigns? We do listening campaigns to learn more about our membership, identify common concerns and problems, identify potential initiatives or programs, engage new women, share what we have learned, do something with what we have learned, rethink our organizations, and effect meaningful change. Next slide, please. So that concludes my given presentation. The next thing we're planning on doing is to have breakout sessions. We will have 12 minutes for our breakout sessions. The questions that we are going to ask and talk about in our breakout groups are, what does listening mean to you? What was intriguing or interesting about the information you just heard? And how do you think you could use this information in your specific leadership role? Now, Marcia will be breaking us up into our groups. And then after our groups are done, we'll come back together, and then we will share the information from each of our groups. And I believe we have a scribe for each of our groups who can take down notes and then report back to us after we have our breakout session. So thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to seeing all of you after we finish our breakout groups. Thank you very much. Marcia, take it away. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone found the breakout groups interesting and informative and helpful to you. So let's start out by sharing. And you know what, Marcia, can we go to a gallery view? Okay.
Sure, I will stop this.
Okay, so hi, everyone. Not everyone. There are too many people for one screen. So what I'm going to also ask you to do is, as we share, please unmute yourself. So does somebody want to volunteer to go first? Otherwise, I'll call on the scribes.
I'll go first.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
I have to go anyhow, so I'll go first. What was the first question? What does listening mean to us?
Yes.
Yes.
It means that you should listen carefully, and you should listen to learn about what people are saying so that you can move forward with them. And that's basically what we said in our group. Okay,
that's good. Was anybody surprised that you even asked that we were even asking what does listening mean? Did that cause any surprise that we were asked what that means?
No.
Okay.
Not that I remember. Helene, was there anybody that was surprised at that? I don't think so.
Okay, good.
No.
So, and the second question, any aha moments, anything in particular that you thought was very, that salient from what was the result of that?
That's the one I probably had trouble writing down, and I was listening too intently and not writing.
Okay.
But I can move to the third one and
right
tell
ahead.
you that how do you plan on using this information? Will you use it? You should reach out to younger people, listen to their ideas. Even though it may be difficult, you've been doing something the same way for a long time, but you reach out to them. And even we talked about meeting on one-to-one with people. Sometimes that works very well, even better. Go out for coffee, because you need new ideas and you need younger people to come in. And they have great ideas.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Fern.
Thanks,
Okay.
Fern.
Next person who would want to volunteer, who's the scribe?
I will. I'll volunteer,
okay.
Roz.
Well,
Okay.
Roz, and then we'll do Harriet. We'll go Roz and then
Okay.
Harriet, okay?
Okay. What does listening mean to you? That the person who is speaking has the active part, and the person listening should not do quite as much. They should learn the viewpoints and opinions that are different from your own. They should find out things maybe from outside of the box and listen and give support. I'm trying to read my chicken scratch. Those
That's okay. That's okay. That's okay.
How you can use this information. It reminds you to stop and listen. Start with positive attitude and start on an upbeat note. Get all the information, even if you're not able to solve it right then. You shouldn't take your time to solve it right then. You should get your time to listen to everybody and possibly get together again later to solve the problem. You should question members for their feelings about the items and try to involve everybody. Get to learn about what people are thinking about their particular passions. How you plan to use the information is maybe not talk as much, but let them talk and organize small groups of people to then talk about what you have listened to.
So thank you. So that's great. Thank you so much, Rosalind. And what I want, do you get called Roz or Rosalind?
Roz is fine.
Okay, Roz. Okay. So, but I also want to say that sometimes the information, you don't have to always be doing this one-to-one or listening group for something that there's a problem about or a concern about or an issue. Sometimes it could be for something that you're thinking of initiating and you want to be sure that you're initiating something that people will respond to. So like in my congregation, we thought that having an empty nesters cohort in our congregation would be a lovely idea. But we weren't sure whether the people in that cohort really wanted it or whether we in the boardroom were just saying, oh, wouldn't that be lovely? We need to do this. So we had a listening campaign in this demographic to see if there was actual interest in our community for that event. So I'm using that as an example. This was not something broken. We were looking to augment what we already have to provide more services, to find ways to keep this group attached to the temple instead of leave, okay? And so that was the focus there. So sometimes it's just positive. It's not always in response to what one perceives as an issue. So Harriet, would you go ahead, please?
Sure. On the first question, we were talking about having an open mind, that what you're hearing is worthwhile, and have a genuine interest in what the other person has to say, that their ideas spark your ideas. Don't insert your ideas, don't interrupt, and we learn more about the other person. And I like this one very much. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Yeah. The best solutions can be possible. What was intriguing, how to implement what is said to our members and how to get, there was a lot of talk about trying to get younger members with free membership, and find out what the younger people want. Again, listening twice as long as talking, and the closing prayer was very interesting. And how to use it in a succession plan for new leadership and younger people. And Helene, if I can kind of quote you, you said, stop trying to get 20 and 30-year-olds, try to get 5 years younger than your population. I didn't want to add that, but I just did.
So I think that's terrific, and I agree with Helene. I actually think that for most of us, but I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a listening group with younger people, but I would be careful. This is not where we mine for future leadership. This is how we help them create a group or create programs that work for them. So in other words, it's not, I want to be careful. We're not race cars. We do not go from 0 to 500 miles per hour in one listening campaign. So, this is, it takes a little bit of time. And what we really are trying to do is listen to what these women have to say, see what is of interest to them, see if we can find a way to capture that energy and those thoughts, and without being prescriptive, create something with them that works for them, and not look for new leadership necessarily for us right this second. Let one step at a time. Does that make sense? Okay.
They were just saying how some of them had been in office for 6 years because they couldn't get people to come up.
That's a whole nother webinar, okay?
And how did your empty nest program go? Did you?
Actually, it's been very successful, and it's morphed a little bit. It didn't end up working out exactly the way we thought it was going to be. The programmatic pieces, I'm in a large community, so the programmatic pieces that were staff driven have done well, and we've done hikes, and we've done, museum tours, we've done urban tours, and then we've also created Havarot that were in that community, and it's been successful. We're very pleased. Now, not everybody who is an empty nester participates, but like everything else today, it's a menu of services, and sometimes people do things and sometimes people don't, and then you have a cohort, just like in our organization, that do almost everything. Okay, so but it's been very successful, so thanks for asking. So then I think we have Joanne and Linda yet to hear from. So one of you go, please.
I'll go.
Okay, Joanne.
Either way.
I know exactly where that is. It's like up on that porch, kind of.
You gotta
Okay, so somebody's not on mute, and Joanne, I think you have the floor. Okay.
Thank you. On question number 1, the comment was made that hearing is passive and listening is active.
There you go.
And I thought that was very good. The comments were, tradition may not be for today's world. We must adapt to new ways of doing things, including Zoom. And Zoom is it's harder on Zoom to keep listening. It's easier to get distracted at home, and you wait for the next thing that's coming or the next comment and aren't listening to what's going on. Don't guess what your constituency is thinking, because you may not really know what they're thinking. On question number 2, don't have your own agenda. Be more open to and open-minded to what your constituency is saying, and which gets us to question number 3, whatever your constituency is saying, you need to take note of and see if you can use whatever it is for your group. Also, in a meeting, depending on the organization, if somebody raises an issue that's really not relevant to the conversation, suggest to that person that you're going to continue on, and that person, the chair, will call you and have a discussion with you about it after the meeting. So those are our comments from our group.
Okay, thank you so much. It sounds like you had good conversation in your group. So yeah, that's nice. Okay, and so last but certainly not least, Linda, do you have a report?
Yes, I have a report. So on the what does listening mean to you, we had some good comments about that. Someone said hearing what someone is saying and absorb it, and then maybe be able to restate to them what they're saying. One person said, well, when you're listening, you should maybe not, you should be able to listen so you can respond and react. But then someone else in the group felt like, well, sometimes people just want you to listen and not react and respond. So, you have to, I guess, feel about what that situation is about. One person brought up the fact that maybe even on an individual level for this person, one time, they're speaking to someone and then that person had no recollection of it. And they said, but you were there. But they said, well, I was hearing you, but I didn't, wait, I heard you, but I wasn't listening. So, and someone said, well, maybe that's selective inattention. I don't know, whatever. And then, and someone else said, again, restate what someone else has said. And, those were kind of the main things that we said about what does listening mean to you. And as far as the next question about what was intriguing or interesting, one person really felt like this was a new way to think about how to listen to things. And this really, could help us maybe focus more on how to listen on things, and then how to implement it. A lot of our group focused on like starting in small groups, like at their board meeting, where sometimes there's a lot of different chatter going on and different vying things going on, to be able to have even someone help them to learn how to facilitate that, so that we can listen better in these smaller groups before we go on to the bigger things. So that they see this more as a just beginning. And also recommended that maybe we have books about active listening to give to members of, and suggest maybe do that. Someone mentioned that, let's see, that it's, okay. Also, someone said that they mentioned that a federation, we're trying to have a think tank, and that this might be an example of something where we can use these techniques. And then at the end, we kind of talked about, did they feel like as organizations or represented from the organizations, they might need more help with being able to implement some of these things, some kind of facilitator training. And some of them did indicate that that might be something that's interesting. So that, in other words, a follow-up from this to the next step. And that was our discussion.
Well, thank you. You had very comprehensive conversations. So I'd like to just say, apropos of some of the things you mentioned, Linda, is that active listening is not just one way of doing it. Now, and somebody else talked about Zoom. It is very hard to have eye contact with somebody on Zoom. And I feel that is one of the things that is really helpful when you're trying to listen to somebody and make somebody feel like they're being heard. And so it's not that you're not supposed to ever say anything back. The point of active listening is to make sure that the person who's speaking knows that you've listened. So whatever you need to do to make sure that that person knows that you've listened for that person, that's what we try to do. Okay, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It's not all inclusive. I think the idea of having facilitator training is perfect. And one of the things that Marcia and I were talking about while everyone was in their breakout groups is that this is not just for your organizations, as you were talking about, Linda, and it is a skill set that is really valuable to each of you as leaders in your organizations, in your ambassadorial function. That we always, all of us, these are skills that one can use in so many walks of one's life and in so many aspects of your organizational existence, that it's very helpful to your success. So thank you very much for that, Linda, and I appreciate it. So now I'm going to ask you if you have any questions that you'd like to discuss as a group. Now we have 35 people. I can't see everyone on the screen all at once. So please, if you could use your reaction button to raise your hand, and Marcia, you'll have to help me if I've missed somebody. Okay.
Sure. I'll put it on gallery.
Okay. So does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask or anything that they'd like to share? Okay. I'm not seeing anybody.
I don't see any.
Oh, Linda,
I would just like to add, I think I really enjoy the breakout rooms. It's you really can get a lot of discussion done rather than have a large group meeting. And I thought it was really enjoyable. And trying to think, even if you have a large group, it might be advantageous to do that in a regular meeting too, because everybody gets to speak. When you're at a large meeting, I've been at meetings where sometimes you don't hear from people. And so it encourages you to hear from everybody. So
that's an excellent idea, Eve. It really is. And then we've got Linda and then Helene. And then if there's anybody else.
Yes. First of all, I also want to echo what Eve said, and also just that thank you for doing this. And I think it's a great beginning for many of us. But, as I was listening to you, go over your general information, and I'm very enthusiastic about trying to do these kinds of, and as a federation, that's what we do. We're supposed to be, reaching out to our constituents, especially, and seeing, how we can serve them better and how, we can be a part of each other. So, and even as I was talking to the constituent members of our organization, taking this from a big picture to the little picture of the devil's, as they say, is always in the details, I guess.
Yes.
So my question to you, and I know you said you were going to send the slides, but are there, like, I like the example you gave of us and of how you actually took it from, an idea to the idea of the reaching out to the, the empty nesters. I like that concept. But, are there other things that you have that we can use to help us to, have a structure to kind of go forward with maybe doing more of this type of listening with our organizations?
Okay, so I'm sure that we have resources at WRJ that we can try to share with you. If you can, the next slide has my contact information, but certainly CC and Marcia and Helene have my contact information. If you send me a reminder email, I will try to do that for you. But the slides themselves will give you a nice little blueprint. It is a good place to start. Also, quite honestly, my daughter always says, go to Rabbi Google. So, you can, if you went to Google and you did listening campaigns, some of it would be extraneous, but some of it you might find helpful. I know we talk about Zoom, and sometimes there are problems with technology, but it gives us a library at our fingertips that we didn't always have before. So utilize that as well. But I will answer you to the best of my ability. Okay, Linda?
Thank you.
Okay, Helene.
Well, I just texted or chatted to Cece that part of the role of the mission of Federation is to be a resource and a center for leadership training. And having done this, we just did it in our own women's group this past year and whatever. I think that we could put together a group and train a few people who could go out and help individual organizations based on the slides that you presented and the things that I've been familiar with, so that because it's hard to start it on your own and know exactly what to do. So I would think that this would be a service that Federation could develop and offer to organizations to get them started, not to do the campaign, but to help them organize it.
I think that's a lovely idea, Helene, and I think that probably is in your charter as an organization to do this kind of stuff.
Pardon me, you think what?
It may be part of your charter as an organization, it's part of your mission. So thank you for bringing that up. Lisa, I see your hand up.
Yes, I wanted to comment on the fact that you were not wedded to the idea of what the empty nest group would do, that you were rolling with the punches. The group told you what they wanted and you said, sure, that's not what we planned. It doesn't matter what we planned, it's what you wanted. The same thing has happened with a grandparents group at Women of Baltimore Hebrew. It started out with a fairly, I was going to say rigid, but that's too strong a word, curriculum.
Structured.
That's good. That's the word.
And there was curricula attached to it, learning stuff. And most of us, well, the first couple of meetings, the first meeting was well attended. The second one had half as many. The third had half as many. So it was obvious that people were not happy. The leader said, okay, people aren't happy. What do you want? And people said, I was one of them. I don't want an education program. I want to talk to other grandparents about how they grandparent, what they do, what's fun, what's not fun, how wonderful their grandchildren are, because all of us have wonderful grandchildren. And it has evolved and it's become much more of a schmooze, and it's much more comfortable.
Right. So that's what at the end of the day, that's the point, is to listen to our constituents and to make adjustments. Sometimes they're major, sometimes they're minor, but to be involved with what people want and how we can adapt. Linda, do you still have your hand up, or was that from before?
Actually, I have
I'm sorry.
hand.
No,
Who
I'm
has
sorry.
their hand up?
I'll take
I'd
it
like
down.
to say something.
Carol
Okay,
Kaplan. wants-
Carol, go ahead. How are you, Carol? Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you again. I want to say something. You should always know when you walk into a room what you want to accomplish, but be willing to step back if it's not acceptable, if there's a better idea presented. And I've learned that. I learned it from, particularly from Helene March and a number of people, and for WRJ. This is what you do. So that's how you can get something really good accomplished and
So
make
I think,
wonderful friendships.
Carol, you're absolutely correct. And I think that this is a perfect example of, the truth is that we're all better from what we call, whether it's a listening campaign, but it's really committee work. It is doing things, listening to others, building a project, building an idea, but by embracing different perspectives. And our outcomes are always better when we embrace many ideas from many different perspectives. And this is another example of how we do that. So thank you, Carol. Is there anybody else? And I don't see any hands, so just pop in if you have anything else you want to ask. Are we good, Marcia?
I don't see anyone else is raising their hands. And
Okay.
speak up if you have something to say. Last chance. Okay.
Okay.
We're good.
Okay, so I want to thank all of you for attending this morning. I really enjoyed being with you and listening to the product of your breakout sessions. And I'm going to put up, could you put up the last slide, please?
Sure, I'll put
Marcia?
up the last slide now, as soon as I find it.
Okay, so my contact information is right there on the screen. So if you have any further questions or anything you'd like, further comments about, or anything I can do for you, please get in touch. And again, thank you so much. I had a lovely morning with you.
Karen, all we can say is Toda Rabah. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Cece.
And in keeping with Karen's suggestion for a closing prayer, all I can say is I pray that all of you will have a healthy and safe summer. And we're going to start again as a group for our membership with our September meeting on September 15th. Right. Thank you very much.
Karen,
Thank you,
great.
Cece.
Thank
Good
you,
meeting.
Karen. We're all worked out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have
Thank
a great
you.
summer, everyone.
You
Thank
too.
you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yay. All of our work. It just tells you when you work hard and figure out something, it all
I
works
think
out.
Joanne is like busy trying to say something. but
Sorry.
Joanne?
been muted.
Didn't realize I was muted again. On June 30th, the Baltimore Jewish Council is holding what they call a candidates carnival for districts. What I do with that?
44 and 11.
Well, 11, 40, 41, 43, and 46.
I think
From-
10.
No,
No,
not 10. It was
Oh,
11.
that's what, from 5:30 to 7 at Baltimore Hebrew Congregation. I put it in the chat.
Yeah, I see it's in the chat.
But going back to Karen's report about don't forget to vote, it's a good chance they're going to be like vendors, so you can go from one to another. It's not necessarily a sit down thing, and you can ask all the questions that you've always wanted to ask one-on-one. So let your congregations know as well that that's happening.
Did you see my note, Karen, Joanne?
No, I didn't, but I'll go.
I sent you a note that District 10, because I got that information, and District 10 was not represented, which represents Reisterstown. And there are Jews.
And me in Randallstown, and
Yes,
Joanne Windman and me.
Yes, and Randallstown and Reisterstown. And there was
part of Owings Mills too.
Right,
Yes.
and there's no representation there. And so I did write to the person who sent out the email, and I got a response basically saying that there was a lot of candidates running from that thing, but I said, well, are they going to have some kind of response for them for some questions or something like that? And she wrote to me that they would be sent some questions and that they, I guess, would compile them. I don't know how they're planning to get that information to us, but I really feel like those of us in Owings Mills, Reisterstown, and Randallstown,
Thank you,
also need to be represented under that kind of thing, because I don't, there's so many candidates running, and I have no, I mean, when they redistricted us out of 11
Yeah,
to 10, I totally feel like I'm wandering in the woods here, whatever. I don't know my
right.
candidates well.
Joanne, I think when you
I
go back,
I'll go back to them and mention that as
the other
well.
thing I think we're all having trouble is figuring out exactly which districts we're in now because of all the switches. And hopefully there'll be some kind of a way to figure all that out, both from a state standpoint, but also in the federal districts, because they're switching a lot of stuff.
Right.
Jews United for Justice
I
has a
got-
way to find your district.
I got my absentee ballot yesterday.
Oh.
And that's the way I found out, because you see what districts you're in and who you're voting for. That's how you know.
Right.
Don't you get your card? I got a new card. Where
I
can vote.
got a new card too.
Yeah.
But
And
the
that has
card
it on there.
doesn't tell you your district.
Yes, it
It's
does.
a green and white card.
Yes,
Your
it does.
voter's
Your
card
voter's
does.
card.
It's a green and white voter's card with the new information on it.
Mine
Did
has
it come, did it come with your ballot? that you
No.
voted?
No,
How do you get that?
Envelope. No,
if you're
It
in
came from the
Baltimore
Board of
City,
Election Supervisors in Baltimore County.
right. In Baltimore City, they haven't sent them out because I'm in a new congressional district and I've been wondering which one of the two I'm in. And so when I see who I'm voting for, I know that I'm now in the 7th, not in the 3rd. So it's this whole thing has taken a lot of time on the boards of elections to get it all put together. So
Very confusing.
Why did they
Right.
start doing the redistricting? I must have missed that. You know, this whole thing, there must have been a reason why they did that, to make everyone
Well,
confused.
because of
Because of the
population
census.
changes.
What is that,
census-
Joanne?
the
the
10-year
census.
census
It was the
requires
census.
Wait a second, wait, one person, Joanne.
the 10-year census requires that both legislative and congressional districts be redistricted. And there's
Okay.
also attached to that is a federal law that says that this is what you have to do to meet the requirements of a district, including balanced equity for whites and non-whites. And so a lot of Baltimore City lost I think a congressional district. And so all of the districts had to be congressional districts had to be redone. The problem is that the maps that they keep putting up don't have enough streets and roads or major roads so that you can figure, other than 83 or 695, so that you can figure out where you are. But once you get your ballot, if you're doing it beforehand, you'll know where they are.
Thank you, Joanne.
Yeah, one of the other things is the census tells you population changes.
Right.
So for instance, Baltimore City has lost a population.
Right.
So that's why their numbers have dropped, the districts have dropped, so that the census tells you which areas need more representation and which need less.
Also, it's very political, and that's, they had to redraw the map because it was politicized. But I will say that when I was redistricted, my representative now is Rupersberger, who lives on the other side of the county, who does not represent me at all. So, I mean, I feel very.
But he really does. He's really a good guy.
He's
Yeah,
a good guy,
he's
but he
good.
doesn't know my district. I mean, he's, you know, it's
Yes, he
wrong,
does.
You know,
He
I
really
don't know.
does.
He
Anyway.
really does. He
Lucky
was county
because he was
exec, so he
county
understands.
executive.
Linda will talk. He's a great guy.
Before-
I know he's a great guy, but I
Very liberal, very pro-choice, very pro-environment.
He was your county executive, so
Exactly.
he knows your county
I
better
know
than
who
a
he
lot
is.
of other people who might just run from, one legislative.
I
district.
like Dutch Rupersberger. That's not my point. My
Yeah,
point
no, I know.
is that his district is the Eastern County. And if they want things that, they need federal funds for the Eastern County, or they need things for over there, that's where he's going to put his energies to do that. He's very much on my on my other issues, I agree with you. And the same thing with Randallstown. I mean, I was part of the Pikesville, whatever, and now, I mean, I feel like everything's been changed. So, but it's very political, but that's why they had to go back and redistrict it, because the way they cut up the things they said was not, they were, that's why some people feel disenfranchised. I'm not talking about myself, but other people feel disenfranchised because they just use it to try to gain what they're trying to gain. So anyway, that's my thought.
I have a much more global question. I am so confused calendar-wise. When is Rosh Hashanah?
You always go on the Federation calendar. We have all the Jewish.
It's late September,
Oh,
September
thank you.
29th, September 27th, something like that.
Rosh Hashanah is, I have a calendar here for
I
September.
have it here. Erev Rosh Hashanah is the 25th and the first day is the 26th.
And Monday and Tuesday.
Everybody's talking at once.
One person, people, I know we all want to do, Edie.
Erev Rosh Hashanah is Sunday, September 25th.
Thank you.
At
And I
night.
can do everything else after that. 10 days, 10 days, 10 days,
Right.
and I'm done. Thank you.
Now Rosh Hashanah starts Sunday night, the 25th.
Sunday night.
Right.
Okay.
Erev Yom Kippur is Tuesday, the 4th, September, right after Labor Day.
You mean October 4th?
Wednesday.
October 4th.
October
I
4th.
mean October. Oh, yeah, right. Forget what I said about that.
Erev is Tuesday, the 4th. Right.
We're going to do Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah.
Thank you.
And I hope I can get together with my family of a lot of people as I used to.
Me too, me too.
It's hard.
Too long.
It's
Okay.
crazy. Anyway, this was a wonderful program and a great start to the year, and I'm excited about everything.
Yeah, this is the third time I've listened to a listening campaign.
Wow.
And each time I learned something new. I did one that WRJ, I went to a meeting for them, then WBHC did that, and now this. And it's always something new. And we'll get the PowerPoint from Karen and her script, because PowerPoints don't have all the information. So that really gives us more in-depth information. And organizations can incorporate it if they so desire. I think it's great.
And it's not just for organizational work.
Anything.
It's for our families.
Good point. It's a skill. The listening, good active listening is a skill.
We had a whole, I think it was a half day, maybe 2 half-day session in our training program on active listening. We actually had lectures, and then we had little sessions with another person.
Yeah, it is a skill to learn, and we thought when we discussed what we should do for this meeting, that something can be brought back to each individual organization that would be really helpful, and we all thought this would be great.
But what she did say, and I want to reemphasize that, because there's the second part of that. The listening is great, but if you don't take action and you don't do anything for, then doesn't have the value that it needs. So
absolutely,
I think we have to remember that, especially organizationally. I mean, also individually. Yes, when someone's listening, hopefully you're listening to them so that you can hear them, so that you can understand them better, and maybe have better relationships. But in organizational work, if, as she said, if we have ideas that, gee, we think this would be great, we need to hear from our constituent organizations. Is this something that they need? Maybe they don't think that they need it, or maybe
Karen, what she says was, wait a second, what she says was important is, before you even have a listening campaign, you get your goals, you get everything planned on why you even want a listening campaign.
Right.
So you're planning it ahead of time, and then you can be surprised, from it, but you have your reasons why. And Helene.
At Women of BHC, after we were trained, the membership portfolio has had 2 focus groups. Now, they didn't get a lot of people, but what we've learned a couple of things. One of the things that we learned that a couple women said was that they wanted to do a women's Shabbat dinner at Baltimore Hebrew. So Marcia, who will be the new president, has talked about trying to trying to incorporate that into the programming for the year so that we heard what they had to say and we want to try and implement it. The problem is when we do these focus groups, people say they're going to come and they don't come. So we end up having very few. And I kind of think some of these one-on-ones may even be better than the
But we did listen, people in our survey, we found when we talked to people, they wanted a book club. We started a book club. They wanted this. So we were
The
really
grandparent
actively
thing.
listening. Right.
Yeah.
right
Actively
grandparenting
listening.
the same way.
Yeah.
Thank you. One-on-one is really the best way to go out to lunch or have dinner together with somebody or do something with them. I thank you for a wonderful program, but I need to go on to
Yes. All right.
Thank you, Marcy.
family
Nice to
visiting.
see everybody.
And,
All
okay.
right.
Nice seeing
Good to see everybody.
Everyone have a, see you
Nice.
soon all.
Yeah, be
Take
safe.
care. This is recorded. I'll just edit out things that like our conversations this now, but we'll put the main
And what I do.
presentation from Karen on the website. Okay, Eve, you'll take care of that. Take care.
Carol said something very important that fits right into the listening sessions. You need to, and what you said, Marcy, about having a goal.
Yes.
You have, before you even go into a planning meeting, you need to have a goal, what you hope to accomplish. And it's, even if it's just to learn everybody's name, that might, that's pretty meager, but still, that's a goal. And that can't be minimized, I guess. But yeah, that's very important. And the listening sessions are good. Otherwise, they become a free-for-all if you don't have a way to harness it and bring it back to what the goal is, even if it's not expressed to the group. So this was a good meeting. Thank you, Cece, if you're still here.
I don't think so.
I think we should be very proud. We offer, the Federation really wants to always get information that is pertinent for our constituent organizations. So I think this was a good one.
All right.
Thank you all for coming. I'll end it now. If we could talk for another hour. Thank you everyone for attending. And,
At least.
And I'll talk to you in a few minutes.
Bye, everybody.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Take care, all.
See you
Thank you, Marcy.
Tonight.
Bye, Rochelle.
7:30 meeting for WBHC.
See you later, Lisa.
You betcha.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.